I'm Rocio Cifuentes. I'm Director of the Ethnic Youth Support Team in Swansea, and we've developed a project called the Think Project, which aims to educate young people and increase their resilience to racism and far-right extremism. As everybody will be aware of, racism and xenophobia has been increasing significantly in the UK over the last decade, probably since 9/11 in America and 7/7 in London. And when the so-called war on terror was instigated, it kind of became a war on Islam, and that means that the very diverse communities that we have living in the UK, including many Muslims, were increasingly targeted for their race and religion. In Swansea, we have a small but growing ethnic population, which includes a lot of Muslims and refugees and asylum seekers. So as a charity whose aim is to support ethnic minority young people, we felt that there's a real need to do something practical about the increasing racism and xenophobia and Islamophobia that the young people we support are being subjected to. And we looked around and realised that nobody else was really talking to young people in schools or really challenging in any kind of practical sense the negative media narratives which were really kind of all around us. So in the context of increasing racism, in the context of the UK's Prevent strategy, which was looking at how to prevent extremism from taking roots within the UK, we were already delivering a project targeted at young Muslims and preventing them from becoming radicalised and becoming Islamist extremists. So we kind of decided to develop a kind of mirror project which targeted young white kids who might be at risk of far-right ideology and far-right extremists. And the concept is very simple. It works through giving young people the facts, but also giving them a very positive experience of diversity. So the people who deliver the program are themselves from diverse backgrounds. They are Muslim, they include refugees, and that opportunity to speak face to face with somebody who is a Muslim or a refugee is very often, for most of the young people we work with, the first time that they've ever been in direct contact with this category of person that they have previously feared. And the program completely changes young people's attitudes. So through the formal evaluation that's been done through various attitudinal questionnaires, at the beginning of the program we know that the vast majority of the young people worked with are very hostile to diversity. They believe, for example, that asylum seekers should all be sent back to where they come from. They believe that most Muslims are terrorists. They completely overestimate the proportion of people from diverse backgrounds living in their areas. The rough estimates for most of the young people we worked with, and we worked with nearly 500 young people over 3 years. So more than half of those young people actually believed at the beginning of the program that the diversity, the ethnic minority population of Wales was over 50%, which in reality it's around 6%. So it reflects the distortionate messages that the media and some opportunist politicians have been putting across. And unfortunately, nobody is really putting those messages right. So schools and other services working with young people have failed really to give young people the correct tools that they need to be positive citizens of society. They need to do much more to give young people the correct understanding, the correct facts, and to give them a positive experience of diversity, because we do live in an increasingly diverse world, and these are the tools and the understanding that young people need if we're all going to live in safe and cohesive communities. I think Brexit was it was a shock to many people, but it shouldn't have come as a surprise because of the strength of feeling which was building against immigration and against Muslims, which was created and exploited by the media together with politicians, and civil society failed to really realise the scale of that threat and failed to counter it with an effective narrative and an effective education. So Brexit is just a moment on this journey, which, as I mentioned, is more than a decade old, commencing probably after 9/11 and 7/7 in London. And Brexit is the manifestation of a large majority of the population's lack of understanding of the realities of migration, the realities of diversity, and combined with their very legitimate grievances around lack of opportunities, lack of housing, and their lack of social mobility. So the issues have been very much conflated, and it's up to educators, and that includes formal education, but also just informal education through community groups, through local media, through online media, to really challenge that misunderstanding and get the real facts across. I also think that we need to go beyond this idea of not being able to talk about diversity and immigration and the idea of zero tolerance to racism. I think that closes down conversations, and in order to really move beyond and to make progress, we have to actually enable and even encourage particularly young people to say how they feel in a safe and respectful environment, so that those views can then be carefully challenged and discussed. I think there's too much emphasis, especially within schools, on excluding young people, or this idea of no platform for racist ideas. Of course, there is a line, and when that line becomes inciting racial hatred, of course that should be treated as criminal. But there should be much more room in schools and in all organisations working with young people for discussions around the concerns around immigration, because most of the time the concerns can quite easily be responded to in terms of giving people the reality and the numbers of people who are coming as immigrants or as refugees or as asylum seekers. And when people get the chance to really understand the figures, for example, today we heard that the refugee population is only 0.2% of Europe's overall population. So is it a refugee crisis? Not really. It's a crisis of everybody's values and everybody's solidarity, and how far they're willing to go to ensure human rights for everybody. That is the crisis. It's not about the 0.2%. And we all need to play our part in changing that narrative. Human migration has always happened. It's the history of mankind. Britain, America, the old empires, that was the greatest example of large-scale migration that we have seen. So there needs to be much more understanding and teaching within schools of the role of, in the case of Britain, of the British Empire and how that happened. Because I think if there's a lack of understanding, then unfortunately we'll only repeat the mistakes that we've seen in history.